The Haunting of Dow Hill, Whispers from the Forest. Have you ever stood in a place so silent, it felt like even your heartbeat was being watched? Not the kind of quiet you find in libraries or during a snowfall. I mean a silence that feels wrong. Like the air is listening, waiting. That silence lives in Dow Hill. Nestled deep in the misty hills of Kurseong, West Bengal, India, lies the Victoria Boys High School. From afar, it looks just like any other relic of the British colonial past, grand, weathered, proud. But once you get close enough, once you step past the gates, the mountain fog doesn't just cover you. It clutches you. And that silence, it wraps around your throat like a noose. Locals will never walk the forest paths at night. Teachers whisper prayers before entering certain classrooms. And children speak of footsteps that echo when no one walks. And of a boy, headless and bleeding, who beckons from the edge of the trees. This is not just folklore. This is not just urban legend. These are the whispered warnings of a hill that has seen too much, a forest that feeds, a school that remembers. If you're brave or foolish enough to keep watching, then settle in. Turn off the lights, plug in your headphones, make sure you're alone, because once we begin this story, you will never walk alone again. Welcome to the Haunting of Dow Hill. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Came Back Wrong. It began with a letter. Not the kind you receive with joy, not a birthday card or a holiday greeting. It arrived on a dull grey morning, in an envelope so thick it could have been stitched together with dread. Congratulations, it read. Arav has been accepted into Victoria Boys High School, Kurseong. His mother read it twice, once in disbelief, once in excitement. His father nodded solemnly, seeing it as the answer to Arav's drifting nature, a place of discipline, a place of structure, a place, above all, of tradition. But even Arav, a boy of few words and fewer emotions, felt a twist in his gut as the train climbed toward the hills. It was a sickness that wasn't motion-related. It was ancient. The fog grew denser with every mile. Windows steamed over, but outside he could still glimpse twisted trees clawing at the sky. And then it came into view. The school. Brick by brick, it emerged from the mist like a secret no one was supposed to see. Victoria Boys High School, old, tired, breathing. The moment Arav stepped off the train, the cold slapped him like a curse. Not the playful chill of winter air. This cold was still, unmoving, like the breath of something dead. His breath fogged instantly, spiraling upward like a warning. The station platform was almost empty. Just a porter, slumped against the wall, his eyes hidden under a cap. When Arav's mother offered him a rupee to carry the bags, the man didn't react. Only when Arav brushed past did the man whisper something that made his skin crawl. "Don't look into the trees." "What did he say?" his mother asked. Arav didn't answer. He just stared toward the woods. The drive to the school was short, but it stretched like a funeral procession. Every tree lining the path looked as if it had seen something that made it bend just slightly forward, in a posture of regret. The school gates creaked open before the car even reached them, as if they'd been expecting him. Beyond the gate, the main building loomed, stone Gothic, with windows like watchful eyes. The headmaster, Mr. Dutt, stood on the steps. He was tall and gaunt, wrapped in a black overcoat that looked 2 centuries old. "You must be Arav," he said. His voice was warm, but his eyes were not. "We're pleased to have you even during the break." His parents stayed for an hour. Tea was served, polite lies were exchanged, photographs were taken, and then they were gone. Just like that, Arav was alone. The dormitory was vast and silent. 18 beds in total, 17 were bare. One was made, Arav's. "You'll have the whole hall to yourself," said the matron. Ms. Senchu, her voice was oddly high-pitched, and she never made eye contact. It's the holiday. Most of the boys are home. But don't worry, the night watchman is nearby. And the staff is always around. If you need anything at all, just don't leave your room after 10. She paused. Actually, let's say 9. That night, Arav couldn't sleep. The walls creaked and groaned as if whispering to each other. The wind outside didn't howl, it hummed, low, vibrating. It sounded like a deep chant from something enormous underground. Around midnight, footsteps echoed down the hall. Tap, tap, drag. They stopped outside his door. He held his breath. The handle turned slightly, then nothing, just silence. The next morning, Ms. Sen insisted she had been the one walking past. "I check on all the rooms," she said, eyes flicking toward the ground. "You must have imagined the handle." But Arav knew he hadn't. The handle had moved. Over the following days, things got stranger. Books he hadn't touched would shift. Places, chalk would roll across the blackboard tray on its own. He heard laughter, not joyous, but broken, hollow, and far too close. And then came the boy. It was a fog-heavy morning. Arav had decided to sketch by the window. The mist made it hard to see the path, but then he spotted movement. A child, small, slender, wearing the same uniform, but something was wrong. The boy's shirt was soaked in red. His neck was torn. There was no head. Arav couldn't scream. He couldn't move. He only watched as the boy slowly raised one arm and pointed to the woods, then vanished into them. He waited all morning for someone to mention it. A teacher, a cleaner, a classmate, anyone. But there was no one. Only the bird song outside, which even that morning seemed off-key. At lunch, Arav sat in the mess hall alone. His plate of rice and lentils remained untouched. The walls seemed to stretch further every time he blinked. The ticking of the ancient wall clock sounded more like a heartbeat than a mechanical rhythm. He couldn't shake the image of the boy, that glistening neck stump, that finger pointing toward the trees. Was it a warning or an invitation? When he returned to his room, he found the window open. He hadn't left it that way. On his bed was a small object, a coin, old, British, pre-independence, tarnished black. Where had it come from? He picked it up and felt a sharp sting shoot through his fingers. Blood welled at the tip of his thumb as if the coin had bitten him. And that night, the dreams came. They weren't dreams in the usual sense. Arav didn't feel like he was asleep. It was more like being pulled into a memory that wasn't his. He stood at the edge of the forest, barefoot. The soil was wet, cold and pulsing beneath his toes. Ahead of him, the trees moved, not in the breeze, but as if shifting aside to make way for him. A voice, soft and slurred, whispered behind him. "Come see." He turned around. No one. But when he turned back, the forest was different. Now the trees leaned toward him. Their trunks were covered in names, scratched deep with fingernails, names of boys, names in English, Bengali, Hindi, even some that didn't look like letters at all. Then the bell began to ring, 1 toll, 2, 3. It echoed through the dreamscape, making the soil beneath his feet vibrate. As the 10th chime struck, the fog parted, slightly to reveal something buried. A mound of dirt, freshly turned with small hands sticking out of the ground like weeds. He woke up gasping. His sheets were soaked, his fingernails were caked with dirt. And the coin? It was gone. Breakfast. That morning was silent. Even Ms. Sen avoided his gaze. "Arav," she said finally, stirring tea she wouldn't drink. "You look pale." "I didn't sleep well." "You should rest more." "I wasn't sleeping." She paused, then smiled without her eyes. "No, I suppose you weren't." That afternoon he wandered to the old library wing. He had only seen it once before during orientation, a massive hall with ceilings so high they seemed to echo their own height. The librarian, an elderly man named Mr. Chowdhury, didn't even lift his head when Arav entered. Dust hung like spiderwebs in the air, and the place smelled of mildew and something else, like wet stone. Arav didn't know what he was looking for until he found it. Tucked behind a row of tattered encyclopedias was a ledger, bound in cracked, black leather, no title. Inside, page after page of names. Boys who had left the school, some marked as transferred, some as withdrawn, some with no comment at all. Just a date and a red line drawn through their name. One entry caught his eye. Rishi, Malhotra, 1974. No body recovered. Forest took him. His fingers trembled. Another name, Samir Das, 1989. Entered woods at night. Heard bell. Never seen again. A chill settled over him. Arav closed the book, returned it, and started to walk away. And then the bell rang. Once, clear, heavy, but it was 2:43 p.m. He turned to Mr. Chowdhury, who was now staring at him, eyes wide with something between fear and recognition. "You heard it?" the old man whispered. Yes." Mr. Chowdhury stood slowly, almost reverently. "It doesn't ring during the day. Not since the headmaster died." "What headmaster?" "The one before Dutt." "But that was decades ago, wasn't it?" Mr. Chowdhury didn't answer. He only said, "It's chosen you. You must not follow it. Whatever you do, don't go when it calls again." But Arav already knew he would, because deep down, something inside him already had. That evening, Arav sat at his desk. The ledger still burned into his mind. Outside his window, the fog thickened, clinging to the glass like breath. The trees were just outlines now, long crooked fingers stretching toward the building. He didn't eat dinner. He didn't speak to anyone. He just listened. And when the bell rang again, at precisely midnight, he was already dressed. The sound echoed differently now. It wasn't from the tower. It was coming from the forest. He slipped out of bed and tiptoed past the creaking hallway floorboards. Each step felt like a trespass. The main door groaned open. Cold mist poured in. The night smelled of pine, ash, and something faintly sweet, like decaying fruit. He followed the sound down the stone steps, across the empty courtyard, past the abandoned shed, and finally to the edge of the forest. The bell rang again. 11 times now, Arav stepped between the trees. The forest greeted him with silence. Even the insects refused to sing. No wind, no movement, just stillness, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The path twisted unnaturally, not in a way formed by roots and time, but as if the forest had rearranged itself to lead him deeper. He walked until he saw it. A clearing, circular. In its center a wooden post with rusted chains, and at its base something small and pale, a skull, child-sized. He stumbled backward, tripping on something half buried in the leaves. It was a shoe, and inside it was a foot. He vomited into the brush, wiped his mouth, and turned to run. But he wasn't alone. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, a boy, headless, blood still dripping from the torn stump. He raised his arm and pointed again. Behind Arav. Arav turned slowly. The bell was there, not the one in the tower. This one was smaller, handheld, old bronze, covered in what looked like dried blood. It sat on a stone altar as if waiting to be rung. Arav stepped forward. His hand moved on its own, fingers closed around the handle. The moment he lifted it, the forest groaned, as if waking from a long sleep. He rang it. Once. A sound like a scream erupted from the earth itself. Trees shivered. The ground split slightly beneath his feet, and something crawled out of the dark. something made of shadows, something hungry. He dropped the bell and ran. Branches tore at his clothes. Roots tried to trip him. The forest didn't want to let him go, but he made it, burst through the tree line, collapsed just outside the school gate. When he looked back, the forest was still, silent, as if nothing had ever moved within it. He passed out, and when he woke, he was in the infirmary. Ms. Sen stood beside him, her face pale. "You're lucky," she said. "The groundskeeper found you. Said you were sleepwalking." "I wasn't." "No, I suppose you weren't." He reached into his pocket. The bell was gone, but in its place was the coin. That night marked a shift. Arav no longer felt alone. Every hallway whispered his name. Every doorknob trembled at his touch. He avoided windows, for every pane showed reflections that did not match his own. He tried to tell someone, Ms. Sen, Mr. Chowdhury, even the silent janitor with the milky eye. Each time they gave him that same look, pity and fear. "You should leave," Mr. Chowdhury finally told him, voice brittle with age and grief. "Children who hear the bell 3 times, they don't stay themselves." "I heard it 4, Arav whispered. The old man's face collapsed into sorrow. "You should have run." But Arav knew it was already too late. The dreams worsened. Not only at night, now during class, while blinking, while breathing. Visions would pierce through reality like shards of glass. An open locker, oozing black water. A teacher with no eyes reciting the multiplication table backward. A boy in the mirror, smiling, though Arav was not. One evening, he locked himself in the restroom, trying to calm the pounding in his head. The mirror above the sink was cracked. A note had been etched into the surface with something sharp. "He rings the bell for you now." He backed away. Then the lights went out. A single glow remained, the bathroom stall at the end. Its door opened slowly. Inside, scribbled in chalk on every surface, "Under the roots." That phrase. It returned again and again, on blackboards, on window frost, on his own notebook. What did it mean? Late one night he returned to the library, hoping for more answers. The ledger was gone. In its place, a single photograph, a group photo of students, black and white. Arav recognized the uniform, the background, even the forest's outline. But what chilled him wasn't the image. It was the face in the second row, his face. He flipped the photo, scrawled on the back, "Class of 1949. His breath hitched. Was it a coincidence, or had he always been here? The next morning, Ms. Sen found him sitting outside the dormitory, barefoot, eyes wide. "Are you okay, Arav?" He turned to her slowly, his voice calm. "He told me I belong to the Hill now." "Who did?" she asked, though her voice trembled. "The boy, the one without the head." He nodded once. He said, "I saw too much, heard too much. Now I'm marked." "What does that mean?" Arav tilted his head. "It means I'm next." That night, no one saw Arav at dinner. His plate remained, untouched in the mess hall. A thin layer of dust began to form on the untouched rice. Ms. Sen, who had always made excuses for him, stopped trying. When the night watchman passed the dormitory around 10, he swore he saw Arav sitting on the roof, cross-legged, still as stone. But when he rushed up to check, the roof was empty. Only a single footprint remained, charred into the tar like a burn mark. The following morning, the chapel bell rang 7 times. The staff froze. 7 rings meant a death, though the tradition had long been abandoned. The chapel hadn't been used in years. Mr. Dutt, the headmaster, ordered it locked, but when they opened it, the air was warm, too warm. And in the center aisle, resting against the pulpit, was a shoe, Arav's. Inside it, a folded piece of paper torn from his sketchbook. The drawing was crude but clear. The school building, half submerged beneath a giant tree, roots wrapping around it like tentacles. windows glowing from underneath, and above it all, in jagged writing, "It's under us." The search began immediately. Forest patrol, town alerts, staff interrogations. No sign, no leads. Until 3 days later, Arav came back, just walked through the front gate one misty dawn, barefoot and silent. Mud caked his legs, fingernails black with dirt, eyes wide, unblinking. Ms. Sen rushed toward him, tears in her eyes. "Arav, where have you been? We looked everywhere." He looked at her slowly, smiled, a twitchy, unnatural smile. Then he whispered, "They dug a tunnel with their fingers." She gasped. "Who did, Arav?" He tilted his head. "The boys. All the boys that never left." He was taken to the infirmary. The doctor called in from town said he was malnourished, dehydrated, possibly hallucinating from fever. But Arav didn't shiver, didn't sweat, didn't blink. When they turned off the lights to let him rest, he sang, a slow, creaking lullaby in a language no one recognized, and every night after that, the bell rang. Even though it had been removed from the tower years ago, the whispers started on the 5th night. At first, the staff dismissed them as wind, old walls, insomnia. But then Miss Sen heard her name, softly, from under her bed. When she looked, she saw not eyes, but roots, blackened, gnarled, writhing. They slithered back into the floorboards as if ashamed to be seen. Mr. Dutt was found standing at the edge of the forest at dawn, eyes rolled back, muttering a date that hadn't come yet. December 13th, the soil opens. December 13th, the boys wake. When asked about it later, he had no memory of being outside at all. In the days that followed, Arav was no longer a student. He wandered the halls like a ghost in his own skin. He would stare at walls for hours, fingers twitching. He spoke to things no one else could see. He once told the gardener, "They're almost through. The roots are cracking the stone. I can hear them screaming." And then, on the 7th night, he vanished again. Only this time, he didn't return. What came back 2 nights later wasn't Arav. It wore his face, spoke in his voice, but the eyes were wrong, too dark, too deep, too full of something else. The creature that wore Arav's face walked into the school library at midnight and began ringing the old brass bell over and over and over. Each time a new crack appeared in the floor beneath the school. Each time the roots moved, closer to the surface, and on the final ring. The lights in the school all went out, not with a pop, not with a fade. They were consumed. The last recorded thing caught on the school security system was Arav's face, smiling, mouths, multiple, smiling beneath the skin, and the whisper that followed, "We are under you now." Chapter 2. The Yai, Headmaster's Bell. Long before Arav's arrival, before the disappearances, before the forest began to whisper, before the boy with no head was ever seen, there was another story. It was the winter of 1937, and the school was alive with discipline. Back then, Victoria Boys High School was known not for ghost stories, but for excellence. Its halls echoed with marching boots, Latin recitations, and the rhythmic clang of a brass bell rung daily at dawn and dusk. That bell was rung by Headmaster Elijah March. He was a tall, lean man with sharp eyes and a sharper temper. His presence was like a blade, cutting through any trace of rebellion or laziness. Boys feared him, teachers obeyed him, and yet, behind his commanding posture was a man slowly unraveling. Those closest to him noticed the changes first. The muttering in empty hallways, the pacing at midnight, the way he'd forget conversations from hours earlier. But the most unsettling sign came in his nightly ritual. Headmaster March had begun ringing the bell at midnight. Not once, not twice, but 13 times each night, and with each toll, something shifted in the air. The boys began having nightmares, vivid, visceral visions of fire, burial, and choking vines. Some wet their beds for the first time in years, others refused to sleep at all. A teacher named Mr. Holmes confronted the headmaster one morning after a particularly restless night. "Sir, the bell. Why do you ring it at midnight?" March stared at him blankly. "I don't ring it at midnight." "But the boys hear it. We all do." The headmaster's lip quivered. Then he smiled. "That's impossible. The bell hasn't rung in weeks." Mr. Holmes paled. That evening he went to the bell tower himself. The rope was worn, the bell warm to the touch, and carved into the inside lip, something he had never noticed before. "Call them from below." He never returned to the staff quarters that night. They found his body the next morning, dangling from the bell rope, eyes bulging, one hand clutching a strip of torn paper. On it, scribbled in barely legible scrawl, "He isn't the one ringing." Upaui. In the weeks that followed, silence settled over the school like a second skin. Students no longer gathered in groups. Their voices were hushed, their laughter forced. March's behavior became increasingly erratic. He was seen wandering the halls barefoot, his coat trailing behind him like a shroud. One morning he was discovered asleep in the chapel, curled at the foot of the pulpit, muttering Latin phrases none of the staff could translate. The Latin teacher, Mr. Iyer, transcribed what he could. One line stood out. "Et campana fit oculus inferni." The bell becomes the eye of hell. After that, several teachers submitted their resignations. Those who stayed did so because they had no other choice. Then came the boy. His name was Arvind, bright, quiet, obsessed with the bell tower. He told his dormitory mates he could hear voices coming from it, not just during the midnight tolling, but even in the middle of the day. He claimed they called him by name. One night he snuck away. The next morning, the students awoke to the sound of screaming. Arvind was found inside the bell tower, kneeling. His hands were blistered, palms torn to the bone where he had tried to stop the bell from ringing by grabbing the swinging clapper mid-toll. His mouth was full of rusted nails. No one could explain how they had gotten there. He survived, but never spoke again. They moved him to a sanitarium in Darjeeling. His final written words, scrawled on a page of his Latin workbook: "The bell is a mouth. It sings for them, and it's always hungry." The school board in Calcutta began to receive reports, strange reports, letters from terrified parents, complaints about sleepless children, notes from former staff warning of voices in the walls and inexplicable sickness. One letter, written in red ink, claimed, "The bell tolls for no reason, and the ones who hear it hear other things afterward." The board dismissed the claims as mass hysteria. An investigation was deemed unnecessary, but pressure was mounting. Enrollment dropped. New teachers refused placement. Parents who could afford it pulled their sons. Yet Elijah March refused to step down. He argued the situation was under control, that the bell was part of the school's legacy. That tradition must not be interrupted. In private, however, his letters changed. Torn journal entries recovered years later included lines like, "I see them when I sleep, in rows beneath the floor, smiling. The bell keeps them quiet. But they're learning to sing without it. I've tried not to listen, but the bell speaks through me now." It was in January, thick with fog and the scent of decay, when it happened. During morning assembly, Headmaster March entered the great hall in silence. He held the bell in both hands. His eyes were black, not metaphorically, literally, every trace of white swallowed whole. Without a word, he raised the bell and rang it 13 times. Students screamed, a chandelier exploded, one teacher collapsed, bleeding from the ears, and Elijah March vanished, not fled. not ran. Vanished. The bell dropped to the floor. It has never been found since, but every so often, on nights heavy with mist, its sound returns. 13 tolls, always 13, always at midnight, and those who hear it, they change. For nearly a decade after March's disappearance, the bell tower was sealed. No one spoke of it. No student was permitted near. No ceremonies were conducted within earshot. The school functioned, but not quite as before. Something lingered. The boys still whispered of shadows that moved when no one walked. Some said they saw the headmaster's silhouette framed in classroom windows. Others said they heard Latin phrases whispered through the heating vents, even though the Latin curriculum had been abolished the same year March vanished. Then, in 1949, a new headmaster arrived, Charles Whitley, a stern British man, determined to erase the school's superstitious nonsense. He reopened the bell tower, declared it a symbol of legacy, even had the old access steps repaired and painted. He stood before the assembled students one morning and declared, "Victoria boys shall rise again. No phantoms shall rule its halls." That night, the bell tolled once. The next morning, Whitley was gone. His shoes remained at the top of the bell tower, still tied, still warm. His clothes were folded neatly next to them. In the weeks that followed, the school attempted to cover it up. Whitley was said to have resigned, but students knew better. Staff whispered more cautiously, and the bell tower was sealed again, this time with riveted iron. Still, on fog-thick nights, some students heard it ring, always 13 times, and with each toll something would change. A boy would scream in his sleep, a mirror would crack without cause. A dead bird would appear on a teacher's desk. The pattern was always the same. Toll. Omen. Silence. Then, one winter, the silence broke. It began with a storm, the kind that seems to arrive from nowhere. Rain lashed against the dormitory windows. Thunder cracked so loudly it shattered a pane in the east wing. Electricity failed across the entire school. Lanterns flickered. Candles bled wax like open wounds. And from the bell tower, sealed as it was, came a low metallic hum. Not a ring, not a toll, a growl. One of the senior boys, Pranav Sen, dared his friends to go with him to the base of the tower. "Let's prove. It's just metal expanding in the cold," he said. Only one other followed, Nikhil, a quiet, sharp-eyed boy with a habit of carrying a notebook everywhere. They snuck out after lights out, made their way through fog-choked corridors, stepped outside into mud and wind. When they reached the tower, they found something impossible. The iron seal had split, not forced open, not broken, split cleanly like something had pressed gently from the inside. Pranav placed a hand on the door. It was vibrating. He turned to Nikhil. "We shouldn't," Nikhil whispered. "We have to," Pranav replied. They stepped in. The air was thick, humming with static. Dust swirled upward like inverted snowfall. At the top of the stairs where the bell used to hang, there was now a large hole in the wooden floor. Not natural, not made by rot or age, carved, perfectly circular. Around it, scratched into the stone. "Noi." Never left. Nikhil backed away. Pranav, however, stared into the hole and whispered something. Nikhil couldn't hear it, but he saw the expression change on Pranav's face from fear to awe to joy. Then Pranav stepped forward and fell in. No scream, no sound of impact. Just gone. Nikhil ran. He burst into the staff quarters incoherent, crying. When they returned to the tower minutes later, the door was sealed. Perfectly. No cracks, no hole, no message, and no sign Pranav had ever existed. His name was removed from the school roll the next day. The bell rang again that night, 13 times. Nikhil never spoke. of what he saw again, not to the staff, not to the students, not even to his own reflection. He began writing obsessively, page after page of tight, angular script in a notebook he never let out of sight. Symbols, names, phrases in dead languages, diagrams of the bell tower that included rooms no blueprint had ever shown. The other boys said he muttered in his sleep, that he twitched violently when the bell rang at midnight, that he smiled sometimes, but only when no one was looking. One night, his roommate awoke to find Nikhil standing over his bed, whispering, "It's not a bell. It's a key. And we already opened the door." The next day, Nikhil was gone. No packed bags, no note. Only the notebook remained, sitting neatly on his bed. It was filled to the final page, the last words, "When the roots reach the lungs of the hill, the bell will sing through every stone." After that, Victoria Boys High School entered what the local papers called its silent term. No new enrollments, no public ceremonies, no mention in school bulletins of the missing boys. The headmaster resigned. A new one arrived, and another after that. Each avoided the bell tower, each forbade students to speak of it. But the forest remembered. The roots grew bolder. The fog came earlier each year, and always, always, the bell returned, ringing without being touched, always 13 times, as if counting down. In 1958, the bell rang out again, 13 times, and this time, it didn't stop. For 13 nights at precisely midnight, the school was shaken by the tolling. Windows cracked, books fell from shelves, pipes burst in the walls. The faculty tried everything, boarding up the tower, chaining the base, even calling a priest from Darjeeling who specialized in cleansing residual energies. The priest fled halfway through the blessing, screaming that he had seen a staircase made of teeth. Rumors spread beyond Kurseong. The local papers caught wind. A journalist was dispatched from Kolkata to cover the haunting. Her name was Anjali Basu, died a skeptic, a woman who had built a career debunking ghost stories and local legends. She arrived with a tape recorder, a camera, and a heart full of sarcasm. Her first night on campus, she recorded a full hour of silence around the bell tower. She noted that the structure seemed sound. She wrote, "If there are ghosts here, they're as punctual and polite as British train conductors." Then came night 2. The bell rang, and Anjali recorded it. The audio was reviewed the next morning. What it captured wasn't a bell, it was breathing. Low, wet, close. The tape hissed after the 13th breath, and then a voice whispered, "We rang it first." Anjali never left campus. They found her shoes outside the chapel steps. Her tape recorder lay beside them, rewound, and etched into the tape reel, in symbols no one could translate, was a phrase repeated over and over in a spiral. Beneath, the roots, they remember. After Anjali Basu's disappearance, the school board officially closed the bell tower for the 3rd time, welded it shut, posted guards, threatened expulsion for any student who went near it. But the guards wouldn't stay past sunset, and the welding marks began to warp, as if something behind them was pressing outward. Whispers returned. Even the trees near the tower began to lean unnaturally, their trunks curving inward like they were drawn to something at the center. In 1960, the government attempted to decommission the school. Locals protested. Former students begged to preserve the legacy. And then the letters came, dozens of envelopes, each marked with the school's crest, each empty inside, except for a single hand-drawn bell. All sent from within the school. But none of the staff admitted sending them. They searched the entire premises, found no signs of printing, no typewriters matching the ink, no fingerprints, and the bell tolls started again. Always 13, never more, never less. It became part of the school's identity. The students learned not to ask. The teachers pretended not to hear. But one boy did, and his name was Arav. He came, years later, but by then, the bell had been waiting for someone who would answer, someone who wouldn't just hear the toll, but understand it. Chapter 3. The Mirror Room. It was supposed to be a dare, just a way to pass time during the winter break when most of the students had gone home and the halls of Victoria Boys were left hollow and echoing. 4 boys remained that season, held back by travel delays, distant families, or, in Arav's case, something far stranger. Their names were Neil, Imran, Kabir, and Arav. The 3 others treated Arav with wary acceptance. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, but his presence commanded a strange gravity, like a magnet drawing fear and fascination in equal parts. It was Neil who first mentioned the room, whispered it like a curse during a rain-slick midnight card game in the common hall. They say it only appears in winter. A hidden classroom, behind the east wing locker corridor. Imran rolled his eyes. There's no such thing. Swear on it, Neil said, eyes wide. Room 3B, but no one knows where. A or C are, just B, and it's full of mirrors, wall to wall, covered in sheets like they're hiding something. Arav, silent for hours, finally spoke. I've seen it. Kabir dropped his tea. Neil leaned forward. When? Last year. I followed the noise. The sheets moved even though there was no wind. What noise? Imran asked. Arav stared. Into the candlelight. Laughter. But not from one mouth. Many, all laughing. Wrong. The room fell into uneasy silence. By morning, the dare had been agreed upon. They would find room 3B, and they would enter it. They waited until the sky darkened to a deep slate. Dinner was skipped. The corridors were empty, save for the flickering yellow bulbs that buzzed with moths and old dust. Imran brought a flashlight. Kabir carried a cricket bat, just in case. Neil had his father's old Polaroid camera. Arav brought nothing. He didn't need to. He already knew the way. East wing, he whispered. Past the old locker hall. There's a door no one sees unless they want to. Like magic? Kabir scoffed. Like memory, Arav replied. The journey was quiet. They passed the broken lockers, paint peeled and rust eating the hinges. Cobwebs hung like banners of forgotten time. And then just past the final row, Arav stopped. He touched the wall. It rippled. Imran gasped. There it was, a door. Wooden, rotting, unlabeled. Room 3B. Neil took a photo. The camera clicked, flashed, and immediately jammed. He shook it. The photo slid out, slow and reluctant. When it developed, they stared. The photo showed the door, but behind them, in the corridor, stood a boy, face obscured, uniform torn. His head tilted at a wrong angle and both arms hung limp. They turned. No one there. Arav opened the door. It screamed on rusted hinges, and beyond it, a room full of draped shapes, mirrors, dozens of them, each one shrouded in yellowing linen, and each one humming like they were breathing. The boys stepped in. Behind them, the door shut on its own. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the mirrored chamber like a closing casket lid. Neil spun around and grabbed the handle. Locked. Nope, he muttered. Nope, this is not okay. Kabir's flashlight swept the room, casting long, twitching shadows. The covered mirrors quivered slightly as if exhaling in sync. There's too many, Imran whispered. Arav took a step forward. One mirror in the far corner was uncovered, cracked. Its surface was smeared, like something had tried to claw its way out. He approached it slowly. The others followed, unwillingly. The mirror's reflection showed them, but not quite. In its warped glass, their movements lagged by a second too long. When Neil raised his hand, his reflection hesitated before obeying. Kabir waved. His reflection didn't. And Arav Arav had no reflection at all, just the shape of his body. A black outline, like the mirror couldn't decide what he looked like. Imran stepped back. This is messed up. The humming grew louder. Arav reached toward the mirror. Don't, Neil shouted. Too late, his fingers touched the glass, and it rippled like water. The air changed. Cold, sharp, metallic. The lights flickered. The sheet-covered mirrors began to vibrate. One by one, the linens peeled away, some fluttering gently, others ripping off like something was crawling out from underneath. Now they could see. Every mirror showed a version of them, but not reflections. Variants. Neil was covered in blood, holding the broken Polaroid like a weapon. Kabir was sobbing alone, pounding at a wall no one else could see. Imran stood in a room made of flesh, screaming without a mouth, and Arav. There were dozens of him, each one more inhuman than the last. Some had black eyes, some had no eyes, some wore his skin like a mask, and all of them were smiling. Behind them, the door began to knock, not with a fist, with a forehead, a steady, sickening thunk, thunk, thunk. They ran to it, pulled, kicked. It wouldn't move. The mirrors started whispering, their own voices twisted. You've seen us. Now we see you. Let us through. Arav turned to the boys. We're not supposed to look. They said, don't look directly. Don't stare. Who said that? Imran snapped. Arav didn't answer, because one of the mirrors was now empty, and something behind them had begun to breathe. The breathing was shallow and fast, too fast, like something was hyperventilating behind them, just inches from the nape of their necks. They turned slowly, together, expecting to find a person, a prankster, maybe a trick of shadow and mind. Instead, they found the mirror. Empty. A perfect pane of glass that showed no one. Not the boys, not the room. Just a depthless black. And then, a hand pressed against the inside. Pale, thin, childlike. It scratched slowly across the glass, leaving a smear of what looked like ash. Another hand followed. Then the outline of a face, eyes wide, mouth gaping, pressing against the inside of the mirror as if begging to be let out. Kabir screamed. The mirror cracked, not shattered, just a clean central line from top to bottom, splitting the image in two. Arav moved first. He approached the mirror, his steps steady. Don't. Neil shouted again. Arav touched the glass. It didn't ripple this time. It opened like a door, and from the darkness beyond it, something stepped out. It looked like Arav, same face, same clothes, same stillness. But his eyes were wrong. They weren't black. They weren't glowing. They were reflective, like twin mirrors. It looked at them, and they saw themselves in its eyes, panicked, trembling, fractured. Imran dropped the flashlight. The light skittered across the floor, sending shadows flying. The false Arav tilted its head, then spoke. You stare too long, and the room stares back. Its voice was soft, brittle, as if it had learned to speak by mimicking echoes. Arav, the real one, took a step back. The doppelganger followed. Each boy took one instinctive step in retreat, and the mirrors reacted. Each surface began to convulse, shifting images, showing dozens, hundreds of alternate versions. Some where the boys were monsters, others where they were dead. Some where they were missing parts of their faces. Some where they were laughing at themselves. And all the while, the breathing grew louder, filling the room, filling their lungs. Arav turned to the others, his voice urgent now. We can't let it leave. Neil grabbed the bat from Kabir. What the hell is that thing? The doppelganger Arav took another step. I'm the one who stayed. Then it smiled, a smile that didn't match the rest of its face. A smile that kept going long after the lips stopped moving. The false Arav advanced. step by deliberate step. Every footfall made the mirrors tremble. Every movement cast warped echoes across the glass. Kabir backed up until his heel bumped one of the mirrored walls. He turned to look and gasped. His reflection wasn't there. Instead, he saw himself lying on the floor, eyes open, mouth agape, neck bent at an impossible angle. He turned to the others, his voice rising. "We have to smash them, all of them. The mirrors are feeding this thing." Before he could finish, the reflective Arav snapped its head toward him. It didn't move its feet, just tilted, its entire body pivoting toward Kabir like it was mounted on an invisible axis, a blur of motion, and Kabir flew backward as if struck by an unseen force. His body slammed into the far wall, crumpling to the ground. "Kabir!" Neil shouted, rushing to his side. He was breathing, but barely. Eyes fluttering. The mirror behind him pulsed. A faint glow spread across its surface, revealing a new reflection. Kabir, completely still, staring outward from within the glass. Imran screamed. Arav stepped between them and the thing that wore his face. "I saw you," he said. "In the forest, in the dreams. You're not me." The doppelganger tilted its head again. "You're right," it whispered. "I'm what's left when you forget who you are." Then it lunged. Imran shoved Arav aside just in time. The mirror behind them shattered, glass flying like shrapnel. Neil swung the cricket bat wildly, hitting nothing but air. Arav, still on the ground, stared into one of the few remaining mirrors. This one didn't show alternate versions. It showed a door, wooden, familiar. The same one they had entered through, but it was closed, and something was moving on the other side. Hands, scraping, trying to get in or out. Arav stood, grabbed Neil's arm, and pulled him close. "We have to distract it." "How?" "Let it see itself." Imran caught on first. He rolled the unbroken mirror into the path of the doppelganger. It paused, stared, and for a moment, it froze. Its mouth fell open. A low, rattling scream began to build in its throat. The mirrors all around began to vibrate. Violently, their surfaces warped, splintered, screamed, and one by one they exploded. Shards of reflection rained down. The false Arav began to scream, its face contorting, melting, folding in on itself. The mirror with the image of the exit door cracked wide. Arav didn't hesitate. He grabbed Imran. Neil pulled Kabir up. They ran toward the cracking reflection, toward the one chance they had, and leapt. They didn't land on floorboards. They landed on water. But it wasn't wet. It shimmered and rippled beneath them like liquid glass, cold but dry to the touch. The boys tumbled across the strange reflective surface, limbs splayed, gasping, bruised. Neil was the first to stand, helping Imran steady. Kabir, who was groaning but conscious. "What the hell is this place?" Imran whispered. They were inside something vast and silent. Above them the sky was black but not empty. It pulsed with flickering lights like dying stars, and somewhere far beyond the horizon, a soft, continuous chime rang, too distant to be located. Arav was staring ahead. The mirrored world stretched endlessly, an infinite corridor of distorted towers and warped pillars of glass, some cracked, some whole, some slowly rotating like they were suspended in a thick, invisible liquid, and along the sides of the mirrored pathway stood rows of figures, people, children, all facing the path, all silent, their faces wrong, blurry, indistinct, like someone had painted over their identities. Imran took a step toward one. Arav grabbed his arm. "Don't. They're not stuck here. They are here. They watch for movement. If we interact, they reflect." "Reflect what?" Neil asked. "Our worst version." Kabir coughed. "I don't like this. I want out. Please, let's find the door again." Arav scanned the horizon. "There's no door now. There's only the bell." What bell? Imran asked. Arav pointed. Far in the distance, perched atop a spiraling spire of obsidian glass, a bell hung. It wasn't large, but it shimmered with power. The sound of its ring came not in waves but pulses, like a heartbeat felt in the chest rather than heard in the ears. I think, Arav said, that's where we're supposed to go. Neil muttered, define supposed to, but no one laughed. Together, the boys walked down the mirrored path. Their reflections below them twisted as if beneath their feet walked other versions, horrible ones. Sometimes the reflections bled, sometimes they smiled back. As they moved forward, the figures lining the mirrored road began to twitch. Not all at once, just one here, then another there, a finger, a tilt of the head, a slow, dragging turn of a body that had stood frozen only seconds before. Imran whimpered. They're waking up. They're watching, Arav said. We have to keep going. The chime grew louder, and it started to echo, not just around them, but within them. Each boy felt it vibrate in their ribs, behind their eyes. Kabir staggered. Something's in my head, like words, not in English, not even in language. Neil grabbed his arm. Hold on, stay grounded. But Kabir's eyes had gone wide. His lips moved soundlessly, mouthing shapes that weren't speech. And then, a figure stepped from the row of watchers. It looked just like Kabir, but its skin was too smooth. Its eyes were just pits. Its smile, too wide. The boys froze. Arav grabbed Kabir and yanked him back. Keep moving, don't engage. But it's me, Kabir yelled. Exactly, that's not you. The false Kabir raised its hand and beckoned. From the other side of the mirrored path, a second figure stepped out. Another Imran, then one of Neil, and finally, 3 of Arav. They blocked the path, shoulder to shoulder. Each one began to speak. In unison. Stay. Be still. Reflect. The real Arav stepped forward. No. His voice was strong. We've already seen what's behind the mirror. You don't scare us anymore. The doppelgangers hesitated, and then cracked. Their faces split open, not with blood, but with glass, like breaking reflections. Fragments fell to the mirrored floor and shattered again, vanishing into the surface. The path beyond cleared. The bell loomed closer, and now it was ringing, in rhythm, like a countdown, a heartbeat, or a warning. They ran. Their feet slammed against the mirrored ground as they ran, the sound echoing in every direction, distorted like laughter bubbling up from a drain. The closer they got to the bell, the heavier the air became. It thickened around them like syrup, dragging at their limbs, dulling their senses. Neil tripped first. He landed hard, his hand pressing against the surface, which this time burned. He screamed. The mirror floor had turned molten beneath his palm, not with heat, but memory. As he touched it, visions burst into his head. His father, furious, shouting through the phone, a birthday party where no one came. The day he realized no one was coming back for him. Imran pulled him up, shaking. Him. You have to move. Neil stumbled to his feet, trembling. It knows who I am. It knows. It's trying to stop us, Arav said, because what's beyond the bell ends it. They pressed on. Now the watchers were moving too. They stepped from the edges of the mirrored path, forming a slow march behind the boys. Dozens of them, hundreds, all blank-faced, all dragging reflective hands across the floor, leaving trails of shivering distortion. The bell tolled again. 10 times, then 11, Arav counted under his breath. We're almost out of time. What happens at 13? Imran asked. Arav didn't answer, because he wasn't sure. But something in his bones, something ancient, something called, told him If it rang 13 times again, something would be unleashed. They reached the base of the black spire. There was no staircase, only a mirror angled upward, a reflection of a staircase that didn't exist. Arav looked at the others. "We step into it." "That's insane," Neil snapped. Kabir, still dazed, nodded. "But it's all insane." One by one, they stepped onto the angled mirror, and their bodies followed the reflection, upward. Their feet gripped nothing. Their weight bent reality. But they climbed toward the bell. The final toll waited as they ascended the mirrored staircase. The bell loomed above them like an ancient sentinel. It was not large, not ornate, just brass, old and breathing. It pulsed like a heart. With every beat, it shimmered, light rippling across its surface in waves of distortion. The 12th toll rang out. It sounded like a funeral. The boys reached the platform. The bell hung from nothing, suspended in mid-air, held aloft by strands of dark mist that wove in and out of dimensions like threads in a loom. Arav reached for the rope. "Are you mad?" Neil hissed. "You're going to ring it?" Arav didn't turn. "I'm going to finish it." Imran looked back down the staircase. At the path they'd taken, now crumbling behind them, swallowed by liquid shadow. "We don't have time," he said. Arav wrapped his hand around the frayed rope. The bell's surface began to shimmer wildly. As if reacting to his touch, he looked at the others. "I know what it wants now. It feeds on the self you leave behind. Your doubt, your pain. The bell doesn't call things, it copies them." Kabir limped forward. "Then let's make sure there's nothing left for it to copy." Arav pulled. The bell let out its 13th toll, but this one was different. It wasn't sound, it was silence. A vast, aching silence that expanded outward like a shockwave, stripping the air of breath, stripping the world of movement. The mirrored sky cracked. The watchers below screamed in a chorus of shattering glass. The tower split open, and the entire world around them collapsed inward. Light, dark, color, memory, all folded together. And then, nothing. The boys awoke in the hallway, back in Victoria Boys High School, cold stone beneath them. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Kabir groaned. "Are we dead?" Imran laughed weakly. "If this is the afterlife, it's crap." Neil stood slowly. "The room. Where's the room?" They looked back. No door, just solid wall. Arav stood, last, in his hand, a shard of mirror. He stared into it, saw himself, just himself, and smiled. Chapter 4. The Forest That Eats Children. Everyone in Kurseong knew someone who had heard the forest speak, not in words, not in phrases, but in promises. It promised silence for the grieving. It promised answers to the lost and to the children. It promised friendship. They called it the Dow Hill Forest, but only in textbooks and police reports. The older locals used another name, Bakonwala Van. The forest that eats children. Most believed the phrase was a cruel exaggeration. Most, but not Mira. Mira was 11. She believed in stories because her mother used to tell them every night until the illness took her voice, and on the night Mira ran away from the hostel. The forest called her by name. The hostel lights flickered like tired fireflies that evening. Dinner was cold. The girls huddled in groups near the heaters, whispering gossip about movies and boys, and who would sneak into the kitchen later for sweets. Mira sat alone, her tray untouched. A small book sat on her lap, fairy tales from forgotten hills. She had read it at least 20 times, but tonight her fingers traced the words more slowly, as if they might say something different this time. Outside, the fog coiled around the hostel windows. The power cut out briefly, and the backup generator sputtered to life with a groan. The yow. Girls shrieked and laughed. Mira looked toward the glass and saw something, a flicker, a shape, a boy. Standing at the forest edge, just beyond the fence, his form blurred, as if the fog liked him. He lifted a hand and waved. Mira didn't wave back. She closed her book, got up, slipped through the hallway, past the sleeping guard, past the churning radiator. She stepped barefoot onto the cold tile of the back stairwell. The night greeted her like a forgotten lullaby. She didn't think. She walked, drawn like a thread pulled through a needle's eye. The gate creaked open for her as if on cue. The boy stood waiting, but he wasn't whole. His collar was too high, his shoulders too stiff, and beneath the fog, there was no head. Mira should have screamed, but she didn't because the forest was whispering, and it said, "He is only the first." Mira followed him. She didn't know why. Her feet moved before her mind had time to catch up. Maybe it was the whisper. Maybe it was the lullaby the wind hummed through the branches. Maybe it was the unbearable silence her mother had left behind. The forest opened for her. The trees shifted. Branches pulled back. Roots sank deeper into the earth. Each step took her farther from the world she knew. The air grew colder. Not the bite of winter, but the hush of a long-forgotten room. She passed the old stone marker with its moss-choked writing, the one the teachers always warned them never to cross. Beyond this lies the hill's memory, her literature teacher once said, half joking. She crossed it. The headless boy never turned. He didn't need to. He felt her, and though he had no mouth, he began to hum. It was an old melody, one Mira remembered. Her mother had sung it in hospital rooms, in dark kitchens on sleepless nights. A tune about the moon and a mango tree. About a fox that danced. About children that flew in their dreams. The sound made Mira cry, not from fear, not yet, but from the ache of something impossible becoming true. They walked until the fog thickened, swallowing even their feet. Then they reached the clearing, a wide ring of earth stripped bare of grass. At its center stood a tree, huge, ancient, gnarled with rot, and from its twisted branches hung shoes, dozens, small, worn, some still flecked with dried blood. Mira stepped forward. The whispers returned. "Pick one." She turned, confused. "Pick one and remember them." The boy stood beside her now. No head, no breath, just presence. She reached up. Her fingers brushed against a tiny sandal, pink, with one broken strap. And suddenly, she was somewhere else, sitting in a muddy yard. Another girl beside her, dark skin, braided hair, a missing tooth, laughing. "Run faster, Mira," she called. The memory felt like a heartbeat, but Mira had never seen this girl before. The vision shattered. She was back beneath the tree, and the boy was pointing to the roots. Where? Something pale jutted from the soil, fingers, small, motionless. Mira froze. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the tiny fingers poking from the soil, still, pale, dusted with flakes of bark and old ash. They weren't bones. They were flesh, intact, as if the rest of the child had just been swallowed whole beneath the tree. She took a step back. The forest didn't like that. The fog pulsed inward, pressing on her ears like deep water. The trees leaned in, and the whisper came again. "Remember her, remember her name." "I don't know her," Mira whispered aloud, but a name surfaced anyway, like a long-lost leaf rising from the bottom of a still lake. Chaya. And with that name came pain, a sharp flash, a scream, a broken swing set in the rain. Mira clutched her head. Visions slammed through her, 1,000 lives that weren't hers. Children crying, running, falling, being taken, always taken. She dropped to her knees, weeping, unable to breathe. The headless boy stepped closer. He reached out a hand. She recoiled, but he didn't touch her. Instead, he placed the hand gently on the soil, beside the pale fingers. And slowly, they began to sink back into the ground, like the earth was tucking them in. The fog receded slightly, and then for the first time the boy made a sound that wasn't a hum. He sighed, a low, tired exhale that echoed with centuries. Mira stood. Her legs trembled, but she stood. She looked up at the branches above, at the shoes swaying ever so slightly. Each one had belonged to someone, and each one carried a story the forest refused to forget. "I want to help them," she said. The boy turned slowly and began to walk again. This time, Mira followed without fear. The forest had remembered her. Now she would remember it. The deeper they walked, the less the forest resembled a place, and the more it resembled a dream. Trees grew in spirals. Moss pulsed like breath. The ground cracked with echoes of footsteps that didn't belong to them. Mira tried to speak, but each time she opened her mouth, the silence inside the forest stole her words. The boy stopped at a stream. Its waters were black, not dirty, not polluted, black like ink. It didn't reflect the trees. It reflected only faces, dozens of them, children of all ages, mouths open, eyes wide, frozen in expressions of terror, sadness, confusion. "Are they trapped?" Mira asked. The boy didn't answer. Instead, he knelt, dipped his hand in the water, and withdrew a small object, a toy, a little wooden elephant, painted yellow, worn smooth with time. As soon as it surfaced, one of the faces in the water faded, and the trees all sighed at once. Mira understood. The forest remembered everything, every child it took, every joy lost, every name buried, and those who helped it remember could help it release. They crossed. The stream on stones carved with old letters. Beyond it lay a grove, and in that grove hundreds of small mounds, each marked not with a stone, but with a single object, a rattle, a boot, a marble, a braid of hair, offerings, memorials, or warnings. Mira's heart pounded. She turned to the boy. "You remember all of them?" He nodded, or would have had he a head. Instead, he reached into the fog and pulled a lantern from nothing. Its flame was cold, blue, soft. He handed it to her. The metal was warm, familiar. Her fingers fit the handle as if it had been made for her. As she lifted it, shadows peeled away from the trees, and for the first time Mira saw the path forward, a narrow trail leading into the heart of the hill, and beyond that, a door made of root and bone. The forest whispered, "To remember is to open is to release, but not all should be freed." Mira took a breath and stepped toward the door. The door breathed. It inhaled the mist and exhaled the scent of rot and memory. Mira stood before it, her hands trembling around the lantern's handle. The root bone frame pulsed slowly, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. The boy stood beside her, waiting. There were no instructions, no key, only the weight of decision. Mira lifted the lantern. Its blue flame flared once. The door creaked open, not like wood yielding to age, but like a wound parting under pressure. The inside was darker than night, a space untouched by light, time, or logic. She stepped in. Immediately the silence deepened. Her footfalls made no sound. Her breath didn't echo. Even the flame stopped flickering. It was as if the air had swallowed all movement. Shapes floated in the dark, not solid, not quite ghosts. Memories, scenes, children crying in basements, small hands reaching for help that never came, doors slamming, chalkboards screeching, and above it all, a constant whisper, "Remember, remember, remember." The boy walked ahead, leading her to a circle of stone. On each stone was a name, written in dozens of languages. Some names she couldn't read, some she could. She recognized one, Chaya. As she read it aloud, the lantern pulsed, and Chaya appeared. Small, spectral girl, blurry at the edges, she smiled. Mira stepped forward, and Chaya hugged her. The embrace was cold, but kind, and when she stepped back, she was gone, released. The stone cracked and turned to ash. Mira's breath caught. She understood now. This wasn't a prison. It was a holding place, a waiting room for souls who had never been remembered. Mira looked around. Hundreds more stones, hundreds more names, and one by one, she would speak them. She began with the names she could pronounce: Adya, Meena, Ravi, Moksha. Each name carried a weight, each one tugged at her throat, like it had waited centuries to be spoken again. With every word, a child emerged from the dark, fragile, silhouettes that flickered like candlelight. None of them spoke, none of them wept. They only looked at Mira with eyes full of relief. Then they faded, and the stones cracked. The boy remained by her side, silent. For hours, maybe days, she continued. Time meant nothing in the chamber of roots and memories. Sometimes the names caused her to stumble, the syllables foreign and tangled on her tongue. But still, she tried, because trying was the only way the forgotten could leave. After 77 names, her voice gave out. She dropped to her knees. The lantern dimmed. I can't do them all," she whispered. The boy kneeled beside her, and for the first time she felt warmth in his hand. Not skin, not bone, but warmth. The forest hummed. The roots above them began to glow faintly, lines of light pulsing like veins in a great sleeping heart. And then, around her, others stepped forward. Children, not the dead, the remembered, Chaya among them. Each one held the name of another. Each one spoke, softly, clearly, and the room filled with the voices of the remembered, setting others free. The stones cracked like breaking ice. The chamber trembled, and the door behind them opened again, not groaning, but gently, inviting them back to the trees, back to the world. The forest had been fed long enough. Now it let go. Mira stepped through the doorway first. The fog had thinned. The trees no longer leaned in menace, but stood still, watching. Not as predators, not as hunters, as witnesses. The lantern flickered softly at her side. The boy, her guide, walked beside her, though she sensed he was not quite the same. Something had shifted in him. In it, the hush of the forest was not oppressive now, it was reverent. She looked behind her. Children walked in rows, no longer shadows, no longer forgotten. They were whole. Each one walked barefoot, stepping lightly across the forest floor as if it were sacred. Some looked ahead, some looked up at the sky, some wept. Chaya ran forward. She took Mira's hand and squeezed. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was clear. She sounded like the friend Mira had always dreamed of. They passed the hanging shoes, but now the shoes were empty. The branches didn't hold them like trophies. They held them like memories. The headless boy stopped at the edge of the forest. He turned. Slowly, and from his neck, something rose. Not a head, not flesh, a shape of light, a blur of memory and grace. His face returned piece by piece, and when it was whole, he smiled. The fog behind them lifted, and the sun rose. The children began to fade. One by one, they stepped into the morning light and vanished, returned to wherever memory had once abandoned them. Chaya hugged Mira once more, then was gone. The boy bowed his head and stepped back into the forest. He did not vanish. He remained, because some memories were too strong, and some guardians choose to stay. Mira turned toward the hostel, now barely visible through the fading mist. She walked home. The lantern dimmed, but it never went out. Chapter 5. Footsteps in the Fog. The night watchman had a simple job. Stay awake, keep the lights on, make sure the children stayed indoors, and don't listen to the sounds from the East Wing. His name was Ravi Thakur, 61 years old, a lifetime of guarding doors and locking things that were better left untouched. But no training, no superstition, no prayer had prepared him for what started happening every night at precisely 2:08 a.m. It began with the sound of footsteps. Not heavy, not rushed, but deliberate, measured. One step, pause, another, echoing down the corridor of the East Wing, the wing that had been closed for decades, the wing with no floor, the wing that no longer existed on any blueprint. Ravi never spoke of what he saw that first night, but he left behind his flashlight and the footage from the old grainy CCTV tapes, which the school still keeps locked away in the headmaster's desk. And on those tapes, the footsteps never stop, even when there's no one to walk them. Ravi had been working at Victoria Boys High School for 19 years, long enough to learn which doors creaked when you touched them, which radiators gurgled at night, and which windows refused to stay shut in the wind. He kept his rounds to a rhythm. PM. Boiler check, 10:30 p.m. Mess hall lockup, 11 p.m. West Wing circuit box. Midnight, 2 laps around. The main hall, nothing unusual, nothing difficult. Except the East Wing, Ravi was told never to go there, not since the collapse, not since the incident. No one ever said what the incident was, just that the hallway had been sealed. Windows boarded, tiles torn up, the whole wing written off as condemned. But every night at 2:08 a.m. he heard it. Footsteps, always the same pattern. Tap, tap, pause. Tap. Ravi thought it was just his imagination until he replaced the broken security monitor one evening. The screen flickered to life, and there it was, a hallway that shouldn't exist. Dark, stretching impossibly long, and something at the far end. 2, distant to make out, but moving, walking, toward the camera, step by step. The screen should have shown static. The camera had been out for years. Everyone knew that, yet there it was, a clear feed. Ravi leaned closer, heart pounding in his chest. The hallway was lit by a strange pale glow, not the flickering overhead lights from the rest of the school, but something else, something colder. The figure moved again, 1 step, pause, another. It was far away, almost a silhouette, blurred and hunched, like the film couldn't capture its shape properly. Ravi checked the hallway again in person. He left the monitor and jogged down 2 flights of stairs to the locked metal door. The sign still hung crookedly. East Wing closed, structural risk. He rattled the knob, padlocked, just like always. No sound beyond the door, no air, no hallway. But when he returned to the security office and looked again, the figure was closer. He rewound the tape, watched it back. No glitches, no loops, just steady movement. A few minutes of darkness, and then tap, tap, pause, tap. The hairs on Ravi's neck stood up. He grabbed a blank VHS and started recording. He wasn't superstitious, but he was careful. For the next 7 nights, he did the same. And each night the figure grew closer. On the 4th night it crossed halfway down the corridor. On the 5th night, its outline changed. It no longer walked like a person. It floated, feet just inches above the floor. Arms too long, head tilted, movement slow but constant. Ravi showed no one, not yet, because on the 6th night, it stopped. Not at the camera, not at the end of the hall, but at the door, the same one he had checked. Padlocked, sealed, and on the monitor. It turned and looked directly at the lens. There was no face, just fog. Ravi stopped sleeping. Each night, he sat with the monitor, notebook in hand, flashlight nearby, hand hovering near the power button, as if turning it off might stop whatever was happening. But the feed never glitched. The timestamp never changed, and every night at 2:08 a.m., the figure appeared. By the seventh night, it was no longer just watching, it knocked. Ravi heard it from the office, a hollow, distant thud. Muffled but sharp, repeating in sets of 3. Knock, knock, knock. On the screen, the figure raised a fog-shaped arm and tapped against the inside of the lens. But that wasn't possible. The camera was mounted 10 feet above the floor. He turned, off the monitor, unplugged it, but the screen stayed on. A new sound filled the room, breathing. Slow, wet, as if the fog on the screen had lungs. Ravi backed away. The breathing followed. Then a whisper. "I remember you." He stumbled into the hallway, slamming the door behind him, and the lights flickered, once, twice, then held steady when he returned an hour later. The screen was blank, only snow, and the VHS tape had melted inside the deck. The next day, Ravi asked for time off. He didn't give a reason, didn't file a report, didn't even go home. He went to the church on College Road and sat there for hours, staring at the stained glass without blinking. The priest recognized him, offered tea. Ravi didn't respond. When the priest stepped away, Ravi lit 3 candles, then left. He returned to the school by dusk, calm but quiet. He didn't enter through the main gate. He went around, to the east wing, to the rusted metal door, with the condemned sign. It was no longer padlocked. He opened it, and inside, he found nothing. Just brick, a solid wall. No hallway, no fog, no lights, as if it had never existed. He laughed. Once, then turned and walked away. The next shift, he brought a new VHS, set the monitor back up, told no one. But this time the tape didn't record the hallway. It recorded his own office, empty, until 2:08 a.m. when Ravi entered the frame. Except he hadn't, not physically, not in memory, but there he was, on the screen, sitting in his chair, head tilted toward the camera, and from his mouth, fog. Ravi didn't sleep after that. He began pacing, not just around the school, but within himself. He spoke less, ate less, carried the VHS tape in his coat like a charm or a curse. At night, the students began whispering. They heard breathing in their rooms, footsteps pacing the halls. But when they checked, no one was there. One boy claimed he saw Ravi outside the dorm window, just standing in the mist, watching, not blinking, not moving. But Ravi had been in the headmaster's office at the time. 3 teachers confirmed it. The fog thickened each night, even indoors. The janitor mopped puddles that never dried. Mirrors refused to reflect. The clocks stuttered, skipping seconds and sometimes entire minutes. At 2:08 a.m., the school changed. Doors that were always locked swung open. Books in the library fell from shelves in slow motion. And the footsteps multiplied. It was no longer one pair, it was dozens, some walking, some dragging, some running. And on the 8th night, Ravi disappeared. No one saw him leave, no bags packed, only a note on the chair in the security room. It read, "Check the tape. Let it finish this time." They did. And for 1 hour and 17 minutes, the tape showed Ravi sitting alone, breathing fog. Then he turned to the camera, smiled, and whispered, "I walked too far." Then he stood, walked to the edge of the frame, and stepped into the fog, not on screen, into it, and the tape ended. After Ravi vanished, the school fell into quiet disarray. No one said his name out loud. The headmaster dismissed questions with strained smiles. A personal leave, family emergency. But the students knew better. They saw the fog linger longer in the hallways. They heard their names whispered in the vents. They saw shapes pass just beyond the edges of their vision, always walking, never stopping. Some refused to sleep at all. Group of boys dared each other to sneak into the east wing one night. 5 went in. 4 came back. The last one, they never found him, but his shoes were left at the threshold of the boiler room, soaking wet, filled with fog. The tapes began changing on their own. Teachers would play back old security footage only to find new scenes spliced in. Hallways no longer in use, staircases that didn't exist, and always the sound. Tap, tap, pause, tap. At first they thought it was audio corruption, until the sound began echoing outside the screen. The IT tech quit. The headmaster locked the media room, but still, the tapes played. Somehow. Late one night, a junior student named Parth fell asleep in the audiovisual lab. When he woke, the projector was running. It was playing a loop of Ravi, walking through the east wing. Except this time, the hallway was full, not of fog, but of others. Other students, other teachers, some missing, some dead, all walking in step. Ravi among them, eyes empty, feet hovering, and Parth swore, just before the reel ended. Ravi turned to the camera and whispered, "We're still walking. Want to join?" Parth never returned to class. His parents arrived the next day, called in by the school. But when the staff took them to the audiovisual lab, the door wouldn't open. Not locked, not jammed, just gone. A wall stood where the entrance had been, painted, smooth, no seams. They tore it down. Behind it, only bricks, no equipment, no room, no trace of Parth, except a single shoe left by the emergency exit. Inside it, a small black and white reel, unlabeled. The headmaster took it. He never spoke of what he saw, but the next day he submitted his resignation, effective immediately, and that night, the fog rolled in thicker than ever before. It poured through air vents, seeped through floorboards, coiled down the stairwells like smoke with memory. At 2:08 a.m., the entire east wing was visible again, perfectly preserved. Lights on, chalkboards, clean, desks set in rows. And then came the footsteps, not one pair, not even dozens, hundreds. Footsteps layered over footsteps, some barefoot, some dragging chains, some clicking in perfect rhythm. Every hallway, every floor, and every CCTV monitor lit up at once, not just in the office, in classrooms, in dormitories, even the canteen. Screens that hadn't worked in years flickered on, each showing a different corridor, and on every screen, Ravi, still walking. But now, leading others, and behind him, fog, and within the fog, faces, smiling, waiting. The teachers refused to speak of it. The board issued a blackout. No press, no police, no statements. But the students talked. Late at night, under their blankets with flashlights trembling in their hands. They told each other what they saw on the screens. Some claimed they saw their own faces. Some saw their siblings, long graduated or gone. One swore he saw his grandmother, standing barefoot in the hallway outside his dorm, smiling through the static. The power cut out 3 times in 1 week, each time at 2:08. And when the power returned, small puddles of condensation were found at every threshold, as if someone, or something, had been watching from the other side. On the 10th night, the fog made it to the top floor and the ceiling began to drip. It didn't leak. It wept. Thin streams of water ran down the walls, soaking textbooks, curling posters, washing ink from the honor board. Room 214, which had been locked since 1998, was found open. Inside, perfectly dry, except for a single chair. And on the chair, a pair of boots, old, police issue, with a folded note between them. still walking. One student, unable to sleep, tried to record the fog with his phone. The video came out black, but when he turned the audio up, footsteps, always. That pattern. Tap, tap, pause, tap. He deleted the file, but the sound didn't stop. Not in his phone, in his ears. Chapter 6. The Diary of Sister Abigail. There are some records that never make it into the school's official archives. They're too strange, too old, too full of questions and too short on answers. But every few decades, someone finds the black box, not locked, not hidden, just waiting. Inside it, a cracked leather journal wrapped in rosary beads blackened by time and damp. On the first page, scrawled in sharp, deliberate script, Sister Abigail, Order of St. Florence, appointed to Victoria Boys High School, Dow Hill, March 1934. No one remembers her, no photos, no death certificate, but her diary remains, and it is not empty. March 17th, 1934, I have arrived. The hills welcomed me with their usual stubborn mist. The trees lean as they always have, suspicious of outsiders. The boys watched me unload my bags with a mixture of boredom and curiosity, most of them too young to realize what this school is built upon. The headmaster, Elijah March, is courteous but distant. He greeted me with a short prayer and a longer, silent. He seemed surprised to see me, though the letter appointing me here was signed by his own hand. I am to teach religious studies and oversee the chapel. It is a cold place, unused, but not unoccupied. March 20th, 1934. Found candle wax on the altar this morning, melted in a pattern not familiar to any service I've ever known. The boys deny lighting anything. The staff avoids answering altogether. Something is being hidden here, something old, and I believe I was. Not sent here to teach, I was sent here to watch. March 23rd, 1934, last night I heard singing, not hymns, a low chant, male voices. Rising from beneath the chapel floor, I held my crucifix and stood still until it stopped. This morning, there were scuff marks around the pulpit, as if someone, or many, had stood there all night. March 26th, 1934, today. I found a book in the vestry that should not exist. It was bound in thick hide, stained and curling at the edges. No title, no scripture, only symbols drawn by hand. Older than this place, older than the language I speak. When I touched the page, my ears rang. The air grew colder. My hands shook. I prayed aloud, but my voice felt foreign. I placed the book back where I found it, beneath the floorboard near the font, and sealed the space with holy water. Later, one of the boys, Samuel, approached me after class. He said, "They told me not to talk to you." I asked who. He said, "The men under the floor." And then he smiled, but not with his eyes. March 28th, 1934. The chapel bells rang at midnight. No one pulled the rope. When I entered the hall, the air was thick, like soup left out in a storm. The crucifix had fallen, face down, and in the dust beneath it a word had been traced with a finger. Stay. I believe the school was built atop something buried, not a grave, a gate, and the boys, they are being taught to guard it. March 30th, 1934. I awoke this morning to the sound of humming, not from the halls, not from the courtyard, from beneath my bed. When I looked, there was no one there, but the floorboards were warm and my rosary beads were missing. I found them later in the chapel, tied around the base of the pulpit like an offering. That evening, Headmaster March invited me to his office. He poured tea. He asked no questions, but stared at me with the look of a man watching a storm form on the horizon. Then he said, "If the children forget, it will wake." I asked what it was. He did not answer. He only passed me a sealed envelope marked with the sigil of the Order of St. Florence. Inside, a second assignment. Observe, report, intervene if necessary. Prepare the right. They sent me here for a reason, and it wasn't to teach catechism. April 1st, 1934, I followed them last night. 4 boys, no older than 12. They moved in silence through the chapel, barefoot. Their eyes were closed. They descended, through a door I had never seen before, behind the organ camouflaged by shadow. I waited, then followed. The staircase beneath was made of stone, uneven, damp. Torches lit themselves as I passed. The tunnel smelled of myrrh and something older, coppery and sour. At the bottom was a room, round, with a basin in the center, and a book, not the one I sealed. A second, larger, bound in leather that breathed. The boys stood in a circle, reciting something I could not understand. I felt my knees begin to give. I stepped backward. The torch nearest me extinguished, and the boy named Samuel turned. His eyes were black, not empty, full, like he saw too much. He smiled and said, "It's listening now. April 3rd, 1934, the headmaster has not left his quarters. I knocked this morning, no answer, but I heard something inside. The sound of pages turning rapidly, then whispered. Prayer, then silence. At breakfast, 2 of the boys would not eat. They sat still, blinking at nothing. Samuel is no longer attending classes. I was told by the matron that he has been taken in for private training. She would not elaborate. The basement door is locked now. The organ has been moved slightly, as if someone wanted to obscure the door without drawing attention to it. They know I followed them. They know I saw. And yet they haven't stopped me, which is more terrifying than if they had. April 4th, 1934, I woke to find the black book from the vestry on my pillow. The floorboards were undisturbed. My window still latched, but it was there, open to a page I had not seen before, a page with my name written on it, not once, but hundreds of times, scrawled in spirals in bleeding ink, and at the center, a single phrase, say the right, or they will. I will contact the order tonight. There is no time left. Whatever they are preparing, it is close. The boys have become vessels, and the thing they guard is waking. April 5th, 1934. The letter to the order was never sent. The chapel's mail satchel was returned to me unopened, bound shut with twine I did not use. Inside, my note, torn in half, and beneath it, pressed between the pages, my rosary beads, snapped. Someone is watching every move I make. I no longer sleep in my room. I've taken to the library, locking myself inside after dark. The crucifix above the main desk has begun to tilt to the left, even after I've realigned it. This morning, the boys were not in class. All of them. Gone. I found a trail of ash leading from the dormitory to the chapel. Inside, the pews were gone, the altar stripped. In their place, a circle of salt and 13 candles, and in the center, Samuel. He was standing motionless, eyes rolled back, muttering phrases that caused the windows to shudder. I approached him, whispered his name. He blinked, smiled, and said, "You're too late. We've already begun." Then he began to float. His feet rose off the floor. His hands opened wide. The candles flared and the chapel door slammed shut behind me. I dropped to my knees, and I prayed not for salvation, but for delay. April 6th, 1934. The headmaster is dead. I found him slumped over his desk, mouth open, eyes fixed toward the ceiling. On the wall behind him, a message burned into the wood. He wouldn't listen. His fingers were blackened, as if he had tried to write something, but the ink had turned to ash in his hand. I searched his room for anything, notes, letters, a clue. Instead, I found a mirror, small, cracked, hidden beneath the floorboards, wrapped in cloth. When I looked into it, I didn't see myself. I saw Samuel, still floating, still chanting, and behind him, something vast. Something moving in the shadows. A shape too large for the chapel, coiled like smoke with 1,000 blinking eyes. I dropped the mirror. It didn't shatter. It laughed. Tonight, I will descend beneath the chapel alone. I've drawn the rite from memory, copied it from the pages I've managed to piece together. I have candles, salt, blood. If I can interrupt the final verse, I may buy time. For the next nun, for the next sister they send. They'll never tell her what waits here. But if she finds this journal, if she reads these pages, she'll know what must be done. Chapter 7. The Basement Gate. There were doors in the school no one was meant to find. Not locked, not hidden, just forgotten. At least, that's what Mira believed when she stumbled across the iron hatch beneath the south stairwell. A door so old the floor had grown around it, the metal pitted with rust and ash. She hadn't meant to find it. She was chasing her cat. The hallway was dim, unused. The cat hissed and vanished through a gap in the wall, and Mira followed. That was the first time she heard the humming, low, rhythmic, like prayer through closed teeth. The hatch was warm. It shouldn't have been, and the symbol burned into it. The same symbol she had drawn once in her notebook without knowing why, glowed faintly when her hand came close. She didn't open it that day, but she started dreaming. Dreams of a staircase carved into bone, of candles that bled wax like tears, and always a voice behind the gate saying, "We've been waiting for the key." The second time she returned, she brought a flashlight. The south stairwell had no working lights. The school said the circuit was disconnected. Mira knew better. She had heard the humming again, just once, faintly, while returning from choir practice. This time the cat didn't lead her. She came on her own. The hatch looked the same, old, sunken, abandoned, but the floor around it was warmer now, like something below was breathing. She pressed her hand to the seal, and the symbol pulsed beneath her fingers. It didn't open, but it clicked. Something inside turned. That night, her dream changed. She was no longer outside the gate. She was inside, surrounded by walls of root and blood. Children stood in a circle, eyes hollow, mouths stitched, and in the center, a throne made of teeth, empty, waiting. When she woke, her pillow was damp with salt water, and the soles of her feet were black with ash. On the third day, the gate opened, not with a creak, not with a moan, but a breath. Mira didn't need to force it. She simply placed her hand on the iron, and it inhaled. The door lifted, slow as bone grinding in old joints. Beyond, stairs, narrow descending. She couldn't see the bottom, only the shadows of flickering candles. Far below, the humming returned. Clearer now, voices in unison, children, dozens, reciting in a language she had never learned but somehow understood. Each syllable carved itself into her memory. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her. The light from her flashlight flickered. The symbol glowed along the walls, painted again and again in layers of dried black ink. Or was it blood? Mira descended slowly, the air growing colder, heavier, and at the bottom she saw it, a circular chamber, roots knotted like ribs, and at the center, the gate. Not a door, not a hatch, a mouth, sewn shut, crusted with wax and salt, and from within it, something moved. "Welcome back," the children whispered. "The throne remembers its heir." Mira couldn't speak. The words gathered in her throat but refused to form. Every instinct told her to run, but her feet remained rooted to the earth, like they had grown there. The chamber pulsed with slow, wet breaths that didn't come from her. The children in the circle never blinked. Their mouths were sewn, but their eyes were alive, wide and watching, not pleading, not afraid, accepting. expectant. One child stepped forward, a girl, pale, eyes so dark they swallowed the light. She carried a book wrapped in what looked like skin. She placed it at Mira's feet and bowed. Mira didn't move, but the book opened. Pages turned on their own, curling in the candlelit air until they stopped at a single phrase, written in a hand Mira recognized. Her own. Speak the wound. Unseal the hunger. Return the gate to flesh. The room hummed louder now. The sewn mouth in the floor twitched. Mira's hand lifted on its own. She felt her lips forming syllables she had never spoken, ancient and brittle. The children joined her. The room shook. The threads sealing the gate snapped one by one, each with a sound like a violin string breaking. The wax cracked. The salt blackened. Something beneath the mouth began to rise, not quickly, but inevitably. And Mira, standing in the center, mouth open in chant, no longer remembered what her voice sounded like when it belonged to her. The gate opened with a sound like whetstone tearing apart. The floor beneath Mira softened, turned to something between flesh and mud. She stumbled backward, breath shallow, heartbeat echoing louder than the humming, and then it emerged, not with speed, not with form, but as a presence, smoke that bled, a shadow with weight. It coiled up through the open mouth like fog seeping into a dream. It had no eyes, no voice, but it saw, it spoke, not in words, in memory. Mira saw every moment she had forgotten. Her mother crying behind a closed door, her cat, once lost, staring at her with empty sockets. The teacher who had smiled at her while slipping something into the floor vent, and deeper memories still, ones not her own. Rituals under the first stones of the school. Children buried alive to feed the soil, nuns whispering prayers as they carved the sigils into bone. The voice inside her spoke. The gate opens. Not once, not twice, but thrice. Mira collapsed. The children circled closer. The humming turned to singing, sweet, awful, holy. The room filled with light and blood. Mira's hand rose again. A new mark burned itself into her palm. A key. The voice said, "Now that you have unlocked us, we will show you what has always been beneath your feet." And the floor disappeared. She didn't fall. She descended, like a feather carried on the breath of the abyss. The world around her, bent inward, reshaped into corridors of bone and root, staircases that twisted through impossible angles. This place beneath the school had no walls, only memory made solid. Each step forward pulled her through moments not her own. A boy whispering into a drain, blood trailing from his ears. A nun digging into stone with her fingernails until her hands broke. A headmaster kneeling before something he could not name. And then Mira heard it again. The voice. Not outside her, within. We were never sealed. We were fed. You have stopped the hunger, but now you must choose the silence. Ahead of her, the corridor opened into a vast hollow. At its center stood a pillar, veined with roots, pulsing softly. On its face, 13 keys. Only one glowed with the mark in her palm. The others were dark. She stepped toward it, knowing without knowing. Every past guardian had been given a key. Only a few had used it. Most sealed it away. Until now. Mira placed her hand on the glowing key. It sank into the stone. The pillar shuddered. Above her, the ceiling moaned. Cracks split the air. And the voice said, "Two more must open it. Then we will rise not as whispers but as gods." Mira screamed, but no sound came out. She was no longer alone. The chamber filled with faces, not bodies, just faces, watching, smiling, remembering her. Mira turned from the pillar, her pulse like thunder in her ears. The faces hovered silently, as if awaiting instruction. Their mouths never moved, but Mira could feel their questions crawling inside her thoughts. What are you? Why now? Will you finish what the others began? She stumbled backward into the corridor. The chamber didn't follow, but the watching did. No matter how far she walked, she felt them trailing behind her, inside her. She found the staircase. The steps were crumbling now, as if the foundation of the school no longer wanted to bear its own weight. Halfway up, she heard something new. Footsteps. Not hers, not echo, rhythmic, deliberate. Someone else was in the stairwell. She turned off her flashlight and crouched. Above her, a soft blue glow began to descend, and with it, a voice. Familiar. You're the one. Who opened it? From the mist, a girl appeared, not older than Mira, uniform like hers, hair wet, eyes dark, and her hands burned with the same mark, but inverted. She didn't smile. She simply said, I didn't choose this either, but now we are the first two, and the third. She looked past Mira, into the dark below. The third is already dreaming. And then she passed her, walked downward, into the chamber Mira had just escaped, and the walls sealed behind her. Mira reached the surface just before dawn. She collapsed against the bricks of the courtyard. The air was thick. The school silent, but her ears were full of humming. And somewhere in the forest nearby, another child woke up, singing a song they had never learned. Chapter 8. The Decapitated Ones. They had always been seen in glimpses, a flicker at the end of a hallway, a blur near the edge of the woods, a child in a school uniform, walking too stiffly, too slowly, with no head. For years they were rumors. Tales passed between bunk beds, shadow games, ghost stories. But now, they walked in groups, they left footprints, and sometimes they knocked. Rena was the first to see them full on, not in passing, not from behind a shutter. She was walking to the canteen early, too early. The fog hadn't lifted. The trees along the back trail still looked like long arms folded in prayer. She was halfway across the east field when she heard them. Footsteps. Not soft. Not distant. Crunching, wet steps. Like bare feet dragging through gravel and leaves. She turned and saw them. 4 of them. All boys. All dressed in the old school uniform, one that hadn't been used since the 1940s. Their collars were stained, their hands limp, and none of them had heads. No stumps, no wounds, just absence, smooth, blank air above their shoulders. They stopped when she looked. She couldn't scream. She didn't run. They raised their hands in perfect unison and pointed to the school. Then to her, then back to the school. Rena blinked, and they were gone. But where they'd stood, the grass was flattened, and a small piece of paper fluttered in the wind. She picked it up. It was a page from a student log. Name, Arav. Date withdrawn, not recorded. Note, returned without permission. Do not engage. That night, the fog arrived early. It crept through the windows before the final bell. The teachers noticed first how the lights flickered longer than usual, how their chalk broke more often, how the students' voices seemed thinner, like whispers stretched across too much distance. The janitor refused to sweep the second floor. He said he saw footprints in the dust, barefoot, small, walking in a circle, outside the girls' dormitory. Rena didn't tell anyone what she'd seen. Not yet, but she couldn't stop thinking about the paper, about Arav. A name that shouldn't exist. A boy who was never listed in the school's graduation records. Who had no desk. No uniform issued in the last 20 years. That evening she went to the archives. The basement was colder than usual. Files were kept in numbered drawers, ordered by year, then alphabetically. There was no record of an Arav enrolled since 1952, but when she slid open the drawer for 1949, something scraped. Inside, the file had already been pulled halfway out, yellowed, curled at the edges. Her hand hesitated. Then she saw it, a photograph. A class portrait. 30 boys, uniforms pressed, hair parted, eyes wide, and one in the back row. Head missing, not torn, not censored, just missing, like the camera never saw it. Underneath, someone had scribbled in ink, "He walks when the gate opens." Rena dropped the file. The room groaned, and the lights went out. Rena didn't scream. She couldn't. The darkness in the archive wasn't complete. A faint glow pulsed from behind the filing cabinets, blue, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. She moved toward it, hand brushing against cold steel. There was a door where no door had ever been, carved into the concrete wall, seamless, but open, behind. It. Stairs descended. Her body told her to run. Her mind didn't argue, but her feet, they moved forward. The air changed with every step. The smell of old paper gave way to stone and wet soil, and then came the whispers, too many to count, too soft to understand, until one of them said her name. Rena. She froze. Another voice, familiar. Don't turn around. It was Arav. She didn't know how she knew. She just did. He was behind her now, breathing but without lungs, present but not alive. "You're not supposed to be here yet," he whispered. "The second has not chosen." "What second?" she asked, but he didn't answer. Instead, a hand, cold, small, trembling, slid into hers. She turned. No one there, just the pressure, just the feeling, and in the hallway behind her, footsteps, not one, hundreds, coming closer, coming to remember her. The footsteps stopped, not with a screech or a slam, but with perfect, unified silence. Rena stood at the base of the stairs now. Behind her, the archive had vanished. There was no door, no cabinets, no walls, only roots, twisting, breathing, like lungs exhaling beneath stone. The path before her stretched forward, lit by lanterns that swung without wind, each one marked with a name. She recognized them, boys and girls who had disappeared, dropouts, expelled, transferred, with no forwarding address. Each lantern a gravestone, each flame a soul. In the distance, a sound like metal grinding against bone, and a shape, dozens of children in uniform, their heads missing, their movements rhythmic, walking toward her. She stepped back, a voice echoed above her, Arav again. "You look too long. That's how they find you." "What do they want?" she cried out. "They want a place to stand." The children stopped. One stepped forward. From its collar dangled something small and rusted, a name tag, her name. And then it raised its hand and pointed at her neck. Rena backed into the wall of roots. They pulsed, opened, and let her in. The roots didn't feel like wood. They felt like flesh, warm, damp, pulsing. Rena was pulled through darkness, not dragged, not falling, guided. The roots carried her down, deeper than basements, deeper than anything built by hands. She passed rooms carved into earth, filled with broken desks and candles, stone altars wrapped in ivy that bled. Names etched into every surface. Some she recognized, some she hadn't heard in years, some were hers. When the roots released her, she was standing in a circular chamber. 13 mirrors lined the walls, each cracked, each humming. Inside every reflection was a version of her. In some she was screaming, in others she was headless, but in all of them she was waiting. A boy stepped into the room, Arav, but not quite, older, thinner, eyes full of fog. "You were chosen," he said. "Chosen for what?" "To remember them." "Why me?" He turned and gestured toward one of the mirrors. She stepped closer. Inside, a memory. Her, at 7 years old, playing alone in the old chapel, singing. Then, stopping, looking toward the pulpit and smiling at someone. No one else in the frame, but her lips moved anyway. I won't forget you." The glass cracked and the mirror went dark. The chamber began to tremble, and far above them, something began to walk. The sound was unmistakable. Footsteps, heavy, measured. Not the erratic scuffle of a student in a hallway, nor the delicate patter of the barefoot decapitated. These were boots, boots on stone. Rina turned to Arav. His face had changed, more hollow, more ancient. "Someone else has come," he whispered. "Who?" "Another who remembers." The chamber walls rippled, roots slid open like eyelids, and a girl stepped through. She wasn't headless, she wasn't ghostly, she was alive, her face pale, lips cracked, eyes wide with something deeper than fear. Understanding. Rina recognized her, not by name, but from her dreams. "She's the third," Arav said. The girl looked at the mirrors, then at Rina. Then she spoke. "It's time." Without another word, she crossed to the far wall, where a great crack split the stone. Inside the fracture, light. Not warm, not bright. Blue. Cold. Arav stepped between them. "If the three of you stand together, the gate will open fully." Rina's throat tightened. "What's on the other side?" His smile was soft. "The rest of them." The chamber trembled again. Dust rained from the ceiling, and high above, bells began to toll. 13 times. The mirrors all went black, and in unison, the decapitated ones whispered, "We remember." The mirrors began to hum, low at first, like breath against glass, then louder, building into a chorus of memory. The chamber's floor cracked open in a perfect ring. Beneath it, stairs, not descending into darkness, but into light, that same cold, blue, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Rina, the third girl, and Arav descended without speaking. With each step, the temperature dropped. So did the silence. It grew heavier, thicker, pressing on their eardrums until it felt like something was holding back a scream. At the bottom, a vast circular vault. A door stood at the center, round, smooth, carved from bone and blackened wood. No handle, only 3 indentations, each one shaped like a palm. Arav turned to them both. "You don't have to do this." But the third girl had already stepped forward. She placed her hand into the left mark. The light surged. Rina followed. The right mark accepted her instantly, and Arav hesitated. "I failed before," he said. Rina looked at him. "You were the first. You were alone." He nodded, then placed his hand into the final mark. The vault opened, not with sound, but with wind, a rush of air that carried centuries of breath, dust, and voices. They stepped into a world that did not belong to the living, a landscape of fog and starlight, and the decapitated ones waited there, whole again, smiling and crying because they had been remembered, and now they could rest. Still watching? Still breathing? Then you've heard them too. The footsteps in the dark, the whisper from beneath the roots, the bell that tolls. Even now, they remember you. And now, you remember them. But don't keep it to yourself. Share this story before the fog rolls into your room, before the mirrors begin to hum, before they come knocking. Because once you know what sleeps under Dow Hill, you're part of it. Subscribe, share, speak their names before your name is added to the list.